Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining tonight's webinar, Communicating Your Fit in a Cover Letter. It's presented by Staci Collins, our very own senior resume specialist at Ivy Exec. So Staci Collins has over 15 years of experience partnering with managers at all levels in technology, management consulting, and healthcare management to build their careers via career strategy, career assessment and selection, and strategic resume and cover letter development. She's collaborated with over 1,000 managers to identify and achieve their career objectives. Staci has worked at top-tier companies such as Accenture, Ernst Young, in change management, human resources, and strategic planning. She received her MBA from Haas at UC Berkeley and also a bachelor's from Harvard. So with that, I'm going to give it off to Staci.
Okay, thanks, Maciej. Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me. It's great to be here with everybody from all over the world. I got a message from somebody in Madrid. Hello, my friend in Madrid. I haven't linked in with you yet, but it's great to be in touch with the global marketplace. I would just add to the great introduction that I got that I do specialize, particularly work with everybody, but in technical career changers, many engineers and scientists and doctors becoming managers or who already became product developers are rising up to be senior VPs of marketing or CMOs or finance folks, what have you. So we may address some of that as we move along, and you can ask those kinds of questions as we move on. So everybody wants to know about cover letters. And that's great. We're going to talk about cover letters and what's changed in them in the last 5 or 10 years and the trends, what the purpose is of them, aesthetics and formatting, content, what to include about your fit, your recent experience, your relevant accomplishments, all of this in so much less room than we've ever been able to use before. But it's still doable. And we'll talk about some don'ts, things to avoid, and e-covers in particular, which can actually run the gamut from being highly formal, as I'm sure you all know, to being extremely informal and short. And we'll discuss that a little bit. And then we will have 15 minutes at the end at least for you all to have questions. We like to do an interactive thing. And as Maciej mentioned, if you have questions along the way, go ahead and type them in the question box, and if something big comes up, I will answer it as we move along. So let's start about the trends and what is different today versus 5 to 10 years ago. The first thing, of course, that's different is what's different from your perspective in your world. You've risen up 5 to 10 years and you're talking to more senior people, the more senior recruiters, and that creates some difference in what you say in your cover letters. They're going to have a more business acumen and a more business perspective, and you should too. And that's what they're looking for. They're also busier than ever, right? So as we all know, their share of mind is going to be much smaller for you. And so you have to make a bigger bang with your buck in what you say. There's no more of these full long page cover letters with 5 thick paragraphs, as you know. All right. Also, online media has changed how people are vetted and how they take in information. So, again, we talked about it, that information needs to be in slower, more intense chunks that are digestible, almost more conversational in an odd way, even though it's written. And then also how people are vetted. People look less at what you say and may go more to your LinkedIn page and see how many recommendations you have and who they're from. Highly recommend you get recommendations, not just connections on LinkedIn. Recommendations speak loudly. You can always offer to give someone a recommendation in exchange. Highly recommend you do that. So you don't have to send quite as much in your references because people can go check you out through online media. The bar is higher. As I mentioned, you're going to have more savvy people reading your stuff, so they're going to want more business perspective, more results focus, and you have to deliver the information quickly. And markets can be flooded. For positions where they get hundreds of applicants, they can look for every single thing on their qualifications list. So make sure you hit as many of them as you can. Given all of these things, it requires a greater demand or has generated a greater demand for specificity, authenticity, credibility, and transparency, right? We want to see everything about you. So how are we going to get all that in a cover? We're going to talk about it. It sounds daunting, I know. Okay. But before we go to the trends, let's look at the basics that have not changed, which are what is the purpose of a cover letter? It is to get them to read your resume, basically, and the purpose of the resume is to get the interview, right? So the cover letter is to get them to read your resume. It's also to show how your background fits with their needs. This is a big thing a lot of people miss. You're not just giving a laundry list of what you've done. You're arranging it to fit what they're looking for. I know you all know that. We're Ivy Exec after all. And to get them interested in your background. To deliver a taste of your brand, what it would be like to work with you. And we can talk a little bit about that. And to highlight the overall areas you've worked in and results that the big results you've made. You don't want to list every single market keyword title, feasibility analysis, etc., that you've done. You want to provide those details in the resumes. You just want to do the big highlights here. And, of course, my favorite, don't go on and on about how you believe you can sing like the next American Idol. I am confident that will be the best candidate. These are what we call claims, and we'll talk about that a little more. We want evidence, not claims. That's why if you give your results, it gives more evidence. If you claim that you're the greatest thing since sliced bread and then you get up there and squawk like a chicken, so to speak, in your interview, it's not going to look well for you. Just as it doesn't on American Idol, right? And a dose of humility is always helpful. The truth is it's not really about how well you sing. It's about what your wonderful singing has done for others, right? It's about what your wonderful problem solving and business development and team management and product development has done for others. All right. So this is just typical. This is the same for resumes as it is for cover letters, as it is for first impressions, right? People form an opinion in 4 to 10 seconds. They've no doubt looked at many other cover letters before looking at yours. They're looking for key information in expected places. They want to know what you do immediately, and they want to know that you've made that connection between what they do and what you do, so that they're taken on an easy journey to understand your position and what argument you're making to them about why you would be the most effective person for this position. Very important. You have to make the fit for them. Now, in fashion now, is begin with the paragraph about the company and your interest fit. This is critically important. There are many people that won't even look at the resume unless you make a pitch, some sort of pitch, or at least a pitch about your fit to what they're looking for, not just a laundry list. So the best way to do this is using keywords from the actual job description, right? For fast or computer matching, of course, is going to look for the keywords. Now, you're going to have market titles in your resumes. Even if you get a resume from us, we'll do market titles, or we try to customize it to the job you're going for. But between companies, and you all know this, the same thing is called something different. Feasibility study, feasibility analysis. You know, I know I'm using the same words, but so you sometimes have to change team management to staff management. You may have to change your words for a particular job description as much as you can. A cover letter should only take 2/3 of a page. There should be lots of white space so they can take notes on you. This is semi-true at resumes, but they tend to highlight things there more. They might write the notes on the cover. Include a LinkedIn URL or a link to your website. You can include brief client quotes, and we'll show you a sample of that later. And right now, having charts, which are tables mostly, linking your skills to their needs are very welcome. Anything that makes it easy to digest in 4 to 10 seconds will help you out. You can see here what's out of fashion. the idle claims, thick blocks of text, too much bold, too much font. Oh, I can't see everything on my screen. Hold on one second while I do this. Oops, sorry. Too much bold, too much font, large blocks of text. I can't see what this says. More than one page. Right, obviously not. Only 2/3 of a page. Large blocks of text without number. If it's chatty or overly clever, it's going to be annoying because it's going to be hard to follow. And don't give a whole lot of personal information about your goals. The whole concept of objectives are very out of phase. Later down the road, you can tell them really what you want to do and what you want to develop, and you can tell them a little bit about that, but it's really better to do it in service of something. So in my professional career as a consultant, what I really want to develop now is more, I don't know, market analysis, more business development into utility sector, okay? Something that will help the company. All right. Now, aesthetics. This is the same aesthetics as resume aesthetics, not very much different. And we want them to match, right? This is your professional package that you develop. So you match the type to your resume, use the serif face, Garamond, Palatino, Cambria. We always use Times New Roman. You can't go wrong with that. Same font and font size throughout. Don't make it too small. Can make your background seem small. Use bullet points and chart formatting, as I mentioned, where possible, and we'll show you some examples of that. And use these italics, etc., bolding with discretion. That's pretty straightforward. Very formal. Not much has changed there.
We have a question from Brent. He's asking, as a recruiter, what makes you say, I like this person in a cover letter? How do you show your personality in a professional cover letter?
God, that's a great question, Brent. All right, as a recruiter, the first thing that makes me like a person is that they get what we need. That it's not really about them, it's about the problems that we have to solve, right? Either growing our business or reducing our costs or retaining our people or building products of better quality that can outcompete our customers. So when they write the cover letter with that perspective in mind, I see what you're doing, I've done a little bit of research on you, even perhaps on your unit, and I see what you've done in the past and sort of where you're going, and I'm really excited by the opportunity and the problems, and here's some of the problems I've solved in my past that you may find useful, and I'd love to bring this kind of contribution to you. This makes me very happy because I know they get it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's that overall. Now, how does that show your personality? Well, one, it shows your professional personality in that it shows that you have the perspective that this is not really about you and what you're learning. It's about what your skills and competencies and experiences contribute to teams and organizations, right, and units. That is a great personality to have in at our level of profession. It's a professional collegiality. Then you can insert your personality around that big nut and foundation in very less is more fashion, right? In sly ways. I've seen people make jokes. In healthcare, for example, I've seen people tell personal stories of why, in the very first paragraph, of why they've had a long burning interest in healthcare because of something they went through personally. That shows a real personality that is appropriate to healthcare. That's not appropriate in investment banking, right? It's not appropriate in consulting. But in consulting, it might be very appropriate for you to tell me that you really loved engineering ever since you were a kid. That you designed everything you could get your hands on, and that you immediately went into mechanical engineering or whatever it was in college, and then got interested ultimately in engineering systems right? Or engineering businesses, or not engineering, more ecosystems, right? So that also shows personality. So you can do it in fit. You can do it in little humor in your last paragraph too. Uh, you can make a joke if you happen to be a very funny person. Uh, that other people laugh at your jokes. Not that you think you're funny. Other people think you're funny. You could do that. So those are some of the ways to get your personality in.
Great, great, great. We have another question from Elena. So she is actually she has a gap in her resume. She was at home. How should she address it in the cover letter, and or should she just not mention it at all?
Okay, this is a very specific answer. It requires a specific answer, to a customized answer. If your gap is a year, that's pretty easy to explain. If your gap is 5 years or 10 years, it gets harder to explain. If you're a woman and your gap is 5 years because you were raising kids, that's relatively easy to explain in a cover letter. People understand that. Now you're getting back in. It can be hard to get back in immediately to a job. A lot of times women who've been out for multiple years with kids have to go in through a volunteer experience that leads to a job, just so you know. Or you might have to go get a certification or get back in some program that will push you into a workforce. If it's a 10-year gap, you got to get coaching on it. You got to get coaching on it. It really depends. I work with some veterans. I volunteer with veterans. Some of them are from Vietnam. They really got, I don't know if you want to say put through the ringer, but they've been out of work for a long time. But we have to customize what we do with them for each person, depending on their situation.
Gotcha. Do you have a question? Do you have time for one more, maybe?
We'll do one more, and then we'll go.
Okay, perfect. So, question from Richard. We are hearing that cover letters are often ignored. Could you comment? How does it differ with level of experience?
Well, that is a really good question, too. That's because people are so tired of reading cover letters that are all about me and not about their company. They just ignore them. Huh. Well, and this is a great question, Richard. See, why do they ignore cover letters? Because they're full of claims and no evidence, right? So they're like, that's just a bunch of claims. I don't need to. Let me go to the resume and see what they've done. How does that relate to level? Okay, at higher levels, well, I think it relates to individual person who's reviewing your resume, I have to say. Some people are going to be sick of covers, so they don't read them. Some people are going to always read them to see what they say. I've worked with both kinds of folks in hiring. So, but overall, as you move up at a certain level, you have fewer people applying for the jobs, and when there's fewer people, there's going to be more customization and more time to read. When you're down at a very low level, they're really expecting low-level things. They may just go straight to the resume. If there's 700 applicants, I may just forget covers entirely. And it also depends on the size of the company and the culture of the company. Smaller companies are and that are in, let's say, healthcare, nonprofit, or social ventures, or even entrepreneurship in many ways, are going to want that cover letter. If you're mission driven, you want to see that someone can write. Also, if there's writing involved in the position, you're going to want to see that someone can write. Not just resume bullets, but string together entire thesis arguments and paragraphs. So I would say it doesn't just have to do with level. I would analyze the company a little bit, and analyze if I'm going through a website. Recruiters probably won't forward cover letters so much unless they're specifically requested. Whether I'm going through a recruiter or a computer system, or am I going for a higher level thing? Is it a smaller company? Is it mission driven? I would ask some of those questions to figure out whether my cover letter is written. But as the job seeker or the salesperson, because we're asking them to give us money, we kind of you have to do your due diligence. You have to be formal, or relatively formal. And do a cover letter. They get easier as they go along. All right. So, Mache, that'll be the last questions. I think we
Great.
should move on.
Thank you so much.
For now. We'll take more questions at the end. So let's look at what goes into these very brief cover letters that we're making, semi-brief. Most letters have 4 to 5 brief paragraphs or sections. You can have 3 minimally, and we'll show you how you do that. But the first paragraph, as you all can see, is really where you say who you are, how you learned of the opportunity. Again, customize this to the opportunity. If you're hearing about it through a business school posting, right, or a job board, you want to say where you learned of it. If you're getting referred through a friend, well, you definitely want to say that, actually, if it's someone they know, and if it's someone in the company. Start with that. It places you in a context. Then you want to do this fit equation, this fit sentence about why your skills and experience match what they're looking for. Was very excited to see this. You're going to see some examples because you're looking in analytics, and I have a background in analytics, marketing, whatever it is. And you keep it short, a couple of sentences, because we're going to go, it's just the highlight, right? We're going to go, it's our thesis. We're going to go into more detail in the next paragraph. So paragraph 2 is usually your longest. It's about your background, but your relevant background I should put in there. So start out by talking about what you're currently doing. They're mostly interested in the last 5 years, then the last 15 years. I realize this can be a problem if your last job isn't reflecting what you really want to do and the bulk of your career was, and there are ways around that. You can just mention it briefly, your current thing then, and spend a little bit more time in your previous position that maybe had the bulk of your experience, your relevant experience. But you just use accomplishments and keywords are what we're looking for. Customer data analysis, increased sales, there's 6 consecutive quarters beating targets by 120% twice, something like that. Reverse chronological works well because usually, as I mentioned before, they're going to be looking for what's recent. But again, try not to go over 5 sentences for this. You got to summarize. You'll learn to summarize. The further you get in the career, the better you learn to summarize what you've done. The third paragraph, but we did recent with high accomplishments. Sorry, went backwards. So now the third paragraph, you can do the real summary of your overall career. 7 years in experience, 3 in product development, whatever it is. You don't have to give do not give every single position. Less is more. I'm looking at 300 cover letters and resumes. I want to know, you distill it down for me, the top 3 to 5 things I need to know about you. You're going to be doing yourself a favor because then I can remember you and move on. You give me 15 things, I can't figure it out. All right. Obviously, highlight the accomplishments most relevant. And in this one, 4 is your conclusion. If you have any unique qualifiers geographically, some people are in America looking to go somewhere else, or they're somewhere else looking to go somewhere else, or had experience wherever they're looking to hire previously, or you speak the language if they're looking to hire somewhere. You mentioned this. It could be even a technical language they're looking for. You can mention this as a selling point. Remind them your resume is attached, that you look forward to hearing from them soon. There has been a debate, believe it or not, over thanking people in cover letters because of at our level, at an exec level, or emerging leader, because it's, should I thank them for their time? That's a power differential. They're lucky they're getting to look at my background, right? You choose your own approach to that. That really has to do with your own risk tolerance, I suppose, and your own, not just risk tolerance, your own style. You can thank them for their time, or you can just say, I look forward to talking with you soon. Okay. Now let's talk about two other things of content. Remember I mentioned that charting is big? This is an example of a chart. This is a finance example, so I apologize for our others, but this is pretty heavy consulting focus so far. But you take the requirements and responsibilities from the job description, coordinate, forecast, budget, and then you put your experience right next to it, clear as day. This is the way that you can have one paragraph at the top, short, about your fit, 2 to 3 sentences, a long list, relatively long. You can have more in here because it's already got white space in it. List of their top qualifications and your top experience. Just make the fit for them like that. And then close it with a paragraph about, I look forward to talking with you, or anything special. This works. This is and you'll see a cover letter with this a little bit later. But this is both Ivy Exec's and my favorite way of doing a job-specific cover letter. Then you also include accomplishments. This is the same sort of definition of accomplishments we use in resumes. Find a discrete project. How do you find your accomplishments? Find a discrete project you managed with the scope and scale, size of the budget, the milestones that you met on time, the targets that you achieved or exceeded. You can take improvements over time in your job area, your area of influence in general, that you grew the team from this to that, or you grew the budget or the number of projects you're doing. That it has a result or a benefit, makes or saves money, that you were selected to, that you were the first ever, in spite of. You can tell a few stories in a cover letter, that you grew revenues X%. This is a little, the last line is also for your resumes, really. Instead of saying, I did this and that to improve this, which is more of a job description, you really want to give a resume description, which is, I did this and that, which improved this by this amount. So you can go through your resumes and change those lines, and you also include that on your covers. So now I think we're going to go into some examples. Since 79% of us are looking for specific job openings, here's an example with a chart, a little chart in it, right, of a cover letter. Here's our preferred option. So this is a CFO. Okay, this fit paragraph could be maybe a little better, but it's all right. CFO, and reference the job code, right, which you might actually put that up under the, if you're doing a formal letter, you put it up under regarding this job code. But anyway, you can include that. Strong background in financial management, excellent match for your key needs. And then we give our big results. This presumably is somebody who was with the company for a while. Then takes the key things they're looking for and puts his experience in it next to it. This is obviously a shrunken one. This had more things in it, but I'm just giving you an example. I look forward to meeting with you in person to discuss my background. No thank you for your time here. See this? Again, your choice, and depends on your profession and your industry. Okay. Wait, Maciej, maybe I'll ask if there's any questions about this letter, since 80% of us are trying to do this kind of letter.
Sure. So we actually, I'm going to see if there are any ones coming in about that, but we definitely have enough questions, not about this yet, but for a whole webinar actually. So
okay. Well, let me keep going then, and we'll come to them in the end.
Perfect. Great.
But folks, if you've got a question about this kind of letter, type one in and I'll come back to it. For the next group was recruiters, 8% or 16% to recruiters or general recruiters. You can see that this letter is a little bit more generic in its top. In anticipation, I'll need to meet the needs of some of your clients. And then you just give highlights, because this is not for a specific opening, right? Then you just give highlights of what you've done. But again, you can see these are all results. No responsible for, no assisted, no participated in, no was a team member on, conducted, identified, created, championed, oversaw, etc. There's 1,000 action verbs out there. Analyzed. I don't have the ending here, but the ending of this would be, I look forward to talking with you. And one thing that you can say in these letters is, if I don't hear from you in a week, I'll follow up with you. That way you just let them know that you'll be following up. And it also, people are very, very busy. They might not remember to get back to you unless they have a specific need. So you can alleviate them, that burden from them. Call them themselves. All right. Our third one is a distant network or your network cover letter. If you wanted to reconnect with old bosses, perhaps. Old bosses, by the way, are great avenues for new jobs. I'm in touch with mine all the time. So this one, it's been too long, is a little more chatty, right? It's been too long since we've been in touch. This letter finds you well. Now I put this little next part in brackets because sometimes when you get together and if you're talking to colleagues, you do talk business. But if you don't, you can put that in. But this resume will probably fill some gaps in what I've been doing since B-School, and then a little result, but more informally, right? I've been primarily involved in building new businesses. If you used an iPhone recently, or a smartphone, maybe you used one of my products. And a little exclamation point. Now I want to point out something in the third paragraph, the second sentence. Okay, first sentence says, here's what I'm looking for, a consumer electronics thing. I would greatly appreciate your feedback on my resume. Now, why do we ask this? Because if you ask somebody for feedback, their chances increase substantially. They're going to read your resume. Everybody likes to give feedback. Everyone's busy. And I gave it particularly in so that it's not such a big thing. Like I've got to read the whole resume, which I know doesn't sound so big, but you know how it is. They can focus in on something. You're going to get the more likely they're going to read it. And once they read it, they know they may talk to you about it, and hopefully you can get the feedback because then you got to start talking about your career. And that's how you build somebody to be a networking conduit for you. So once I know the stories of your career, I can go tell it to other people effectively for you. So this is a very subtle but important thing to ask people for feedback on your resume. And when they give it to you, don't fight them on it. Even if you disagree, and I know we all have our opinions, we're all very highly educated and competent people, but they're giving you feedback, just say thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, and take it all in. Don't fight them. And maybe use some of the feedback, but if not, at least, but tell them any stories to dissuade them if they have the wrong idea, but don't fight them on it. Then the fourth paragraph, I'd love to pick your brain for any friends or business associates who might be in the market for someone with my proven product development abilities, or someone with abilities like I have. Don't ask them to find a job for you. It's too much work, and you won't get a response. But they'd be happy to brainstorm with you probably. And particularly if you can throw out some ideas to help their brain go, like companies you're interested in, the titles of hiring managers, your hiring manager title, things like that. And add your advice has always been of great value. And you could get more specific on that, which would be more credible. And I'll call you next week to see if any opportunities come to mind. I look forward to catching up. So that's a good way for networking. One, to get the feedback on the resume. Two, then to pick their brain once they know what you do. All right. I think those are the top three. Now, we're going to go into e-covers and things like that. You can get more informal with this letter the closer you are with people, as you can see, as you can imagine. But even your close friends probably don't know what you do if they're not colleagues, because you've never really talked about it. So getting their feedback on your resume might lead to a fun little 15-minute conversations if you've learned how to tell your stories well about what you do. And it will empower them to be able to help you. All right. I think this works everywhere. these don'ts, and let's just go through them really quickly. Don't, again, this American Idol thing, I call it, make claims. I mean, it's good you're confident I would be the best choice, but did you see how powerful that CFO letter was? He's already proving he's the best choice in a certain way, right? Let them decide that you're the best choice. Just tell them the stories of what you've contributed. Stories are very effective. Don't repeat the same accomplishment in different places. It'll seem like you're padding your resume. Don't use too much jargon, right? Not too many syllables in a row. It'll sound scripted. True professionals mix technical language with colloquialisms, right? We say, oh, I can't think of a good one right now. What do we say? Process re-engineering, effectiveness, and fun, right? So or something, we just mix them up. Don't just keep going on with syllables. You'll lose your audience. Don't write successful and effective all over the place. Specific companies and countries establish credibility. Countries, oh yeah, that's for global too. Companies, countries, and results establish credibility. Sorry, left that word out. Don't give too much text or over-explain your actions. Results are more important in the sales process. Before I know the details of what you've done, which I will ask you about in the interview, I want to know that it's resulted in something positive. And don't take your accomplishments out of the jobs in which they occurred. Functional resumes are kind of out now because what happens is you get a functional resume and you end up trying to piece together where they did what they did anyway. So occasionally we'll use a functional resume, but it has to be a very specific situation. Okay. E-covers. Even shorter, can be more informal, but let me say this. I said the e-covers can be anything. They can be from extremely formal to somebody you don't know, straight up to, 3 sentences to a colleague, a business school alum, right? Or peer in your cohort. So they can be more informal. They do include links in them. They can include client or boss quotes. Don't load it up with attachments, though, just the resume. Nobody likes to see 5 attachments. I mean, do you? No, of course you don't. You want to see 1. Okay. And sometimes you can inline your resume. Just put it in line in the email. Here's an example. This one, I just, full disclosure, a little self-serving. This is actually an example that I used to get this gig at Ivy Exec. So you can see that it works. In the top, I do a summary that you already all know about my career, and then I list a few things. This was a little longer, just only a couple more client quotes. But so I said what my clients say about my resumes, and a little extra sauce at the end with some links. And I got a response to this in hours, and I got a contract in a week. So e-covers you can use a little bit, they can be a little bit more flexible and informal and salesy. But also, now notice that this is another point I want to make to you. Please know who you're sending this to. Estee Lauder is very different than Ivy Exec, right? So is Coca-Cola. So if you're sending it to a big old bureaucracy, this may not work, but if you're sending it to a smaller startup or something in the new economy, this is a perfect setup for them, right? Because they can go straight, transparent, they can go straight to LinkedIn and your website and see what your clients say, right? It's authentic, etc. and brief. So there's another example for you. Now, our last slide, and we're going to open up for questions. Or, yeah, we'll open up for questions. Outside the U.S., cultures can be more formal, even on email. So in the U.S., where you'd say, hey, Brad, you might say, dear sir, or I'm sure you all know that, dear sir or madam, or Mr. or Ms., last name, not the first name. Using Mrs. and Miss varies by culture, but Ms. is safer, and a lot of businesswomen like Ms. rather than Mrs. or Miss. I don't know. But also, this is often cut through with corporate cultures. For example, HP, which was one of my big clients, and I analyzed their global managers. They always push the HP way, which is first names everywhere, even in Indonesia. So you want to know what the way of the culture is for whatever group you're applying to. Using your best judgment, err on the side of formality. We are making a formal presentation still. A salesperson is making a formal presentation to ask for people's money. So you present yourself formally. That's why people wear business suits, except not at Google. Right? And you can always ask first if you can find someone to ask. In some cultures, personal information is used in cover letters and resumes. I just got one of them today. You know, wife's names, kids' names. You all know that it's illegal to talk about these things in resumes, so, I mean, in job interviews in the U.S., so leave them off. You can use your best judgment in other countries. But everywhere today, less is more. So don't overload them. All right, so I think before we go to this, Mache, I think let's do more questions before I go to the end of our services.
Perfect. So definitely we definitely have a lot of questions. So, for example, we had a few questions about e-covers. One question is: are you suggesting a cover in an email or as an attachment? What is an e-cover?
Good. That's a good question. People do them both. An e-cover is in an email. That's it. The only attachment is the resume. And again, I think you use it for smaller emerging organizations. They don't need a formal cover letter attached. If you're applying to a job and they ask for a cover letter resume, I would attach cover letter and resume. Sometimes people do that in one file. Sometimes they do it in two. That's up to you. But I would attach both if they're asking for that. But e-covers are more maybe networking or smaller companies.
Great. We just have a question from Stacy. Should the accomplishments highlighted in the cover letter be different than accomplishments in your resume, or is it okay to include in both places?
That's a good question too. You can include them. They should actually dovetail. They should sync. They should match. In the cover letter, I am highlighting to you what you're going to see in my resume. So then when I go to the resume, I expect to see the same things and maybe to find it easily. You know, that's why numbers are also really valuable, because it's easy to scan and find the number and get the sense for what the person is saying. So they should match. Don't put some big accomplishment in your cover letter that's not backed up by your resume, because it will make me wonder what's going on. So yes, good question. They should match if possible.
Great. Some job descriptions are asking for 10 to 15 qualifications or have a basic minimum qualifications requirements. How do you address all these in two-thirds of a page?
Very, very small type? No, I'm kidding. It's a very good question. You know what I would do? I would do the chart. I would do my table. And I would probably do 10. Most job descriptions have 15 now, qualifications. But I would do their top 10. You might not be able to do all 15. And I would try and keep them on one line. But someone can read through the 10, especially if it's the words from their job description on the left-hand side. That left-hand, then it's easy for them to translate. The other thing you could do, I suppose, if you really want to do a prose one, is highlight the top 5 that you've got and say, I have all the other qualifications you need, the 10 other qualifications you need, see my resume attached for that. I would make sure that those words were in my resume, though, so it's easy to find. Okay, Mache, next.
Great. Great. So Lisa had a question. Any recommendations on how to showcase experience when making a career change?
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. Okay, that needs to be done through a summary. We do at Ivy Exec for all career changers. We do a career summary, which is 3 to 4 sentences that highlight overall experience and transferable competencies, relevant transferable competencies. So you would start a cover letter with a similar paragraph about your fit. And then again, what gets specific is how much you reveal that. Now, a lot of times you say, while most of my experience, my 20 years of my experience, or the bulk of my experience, no, you aren't going to say 20 years of your experience, while the bulk of my experience has been in manufacturing, I have focused particularly on, I don't know, maybe it was your supply chain or something, and so I've had, and I have these skills to deal with that. And now I want to take my supply chain expertise out of manufacturing and into IT or something. But whether you admit that or not really depends specifically on what you have in your background. Because some people have worked closely to the industries they want to be in, and it's close enough that you can make a vertical shift. If you've had no experience in the industry you want to be in, this is a really tough time to get there. But if you're really, really diligent, you can always really push for it. So I think you need a career summary, and you need to highlight your transferable skills. And you can do that also in the charts. They are asking for specific skills. You might not have the domain knowledge or the industry knowledge, but if they're asking for certain kinds of analysis or certain kinds of customer interaction or business development, you may have had some experience in that you can line up to what they're looking for without mentioning too many specifics, so that so that it seems that you've had some experience in the skills they're looking for, if not the domain industry area. It's always hard. Career change is harder, but it's doable. You just have to really get your diligence up, and your endurance, and your creativity. All right. Okay, do we have time for another one?
Yes, we can maybe do one or two more, and then we can close up the webinar and then finish up with any questions at the end as well. So we can have another one too. So we have a question. If you've networked with somebody in the company already and are expecting an interview, does that change the way you write your cover letter?
Wait, read that question again. I want to make sure I got it. You've networked with them?
Exactly. Somebody in the company already and are already expecting an interview. Does that change the way you write the cover letter?
But I don't know who we're writing the cover letter to. Okay, wait, you've networked with them, you're expecting the interview, but now you're writing to a third party. You're not writing to the person that you've networked with. That's what I'm just going to take away from this. I think that's what they're saying. Mm-hmm. Well, yes. Well, yes and no. It doesn't really change what's in the cover letter, but remember how I said you're going to start with how you heard about the position? Yes. So you're going to start with a little description of who you spoke with, maybe what you learned. I'm glad you're asking this. Maybe what you learned in speaking with them. And this is an important thing, folks, that you remember what you learned about the company or the opportunity, more objective than their great company, they have great health benefits. It's more about what they're doing, they're offering, their work. You want to remember what you've learned about the priorities of the work or the obstacles they're having from from one, or about the position from one interview to the other. So in this case, you might say, I really enjoyed meeting so-and-so at this company event. We had an amazing conversation about your needs or challenges or efforts in XYZ and my experience in getting this result in XYZ previously. Wordsmith that, obviously, and customize it. But that kind of specific comment about work would pop your cover letter out of a huge lineup, because it shows you've talked to somebody about our challenges we're already facing in specific. So all we have left to tell you about is further help you can get from Ivy Exec, of course, on this. You know about me, but we have 2 other resume writers also who are quite expert in what they've done and had a lot of resumes published in many places. Mine have been just getting people hired. But there you go. So you can figure out who might be the best fit for you from learning of this. And then to tell you a little bit about our offering, the Elite resume package is our highest level of resume package. There's one that's Exec that has a little bit less service. That sounds terrible. But for people who don't need, how about that, the deeper level of service, they just need a rewrite of the resume. But the Elite package is this comprehensive evaluation, which includes a diagnostic, a number of rounds of resume edits. With me, you get a pretty detailed matrix to develop your accomplishments that people really enjoy because it also drives how you interview. But and then you get a coaching session that we can target on, or we can customize on targeting or cover letters or resumes, etc. And we also offer cover letter review and analysis on its own. So you can set up a 15-minute appointment to inquire about that. You can actually talk with me. I'm starting to do some resume reviews, 15 minutes, and some cover letter talks. And specifically after this, I'm opening up some slots to talk to any of you on this call who want to talk more in depth about your cover letters and goals and how to tie it with your resume. And elites seem to be very happy. Most of my recommendations on LinkedIn from Ivy Exec are from elites. That's it. So thank you very much for this, and I'm sure we'll answer a few more questions. I'm glad that you listened to me, and I hope you found the forced feeding. It's very odd when I can't interact with you all, but I hope you found it enjoyable and helpful. And good luck on your cover letters. And hopefully I'll talk to some of you afterwards. So thank you for coming.
Perfect, perfect. And Staci, thank you so much for doing a great webinar. I mean, I think we have about over 100 questions that were asked at this webinar. So, I mean, just from the interaction that we got on the questions, definitely this is, very helpful. And to everybody, and I know we have a lot of questions, but don't worry, we will try to get through as many of them as we can over email as well. So our staff will be helping out with that. And also, we have recorded this webinar, and as I mentioned, we will send a copy of the slides as well in a follow-up email. So both of those things you'll get. So we will definitely, send them off within about a day or two. So, with that, I just want to, thank Staci for doing a fantastic webinar, and we'll do a few questions as well.
Okay. Thanks for having me.
Perfect, perfect. And we'll go probably a few more minutes as well to be respectful of everybody's time. But we do have some questions. For example, Lisa asked, if you don't have a contact name, should the salutation in the cover letter be Dear Sir or Madame?
Oh, it should be slash. Dear Sir slash Madam.
Sorry. It was written that way. Sorry, but if you don't have a name of somebody, should you actually write that salutation, or maybe something else?
Yeah. Well, that's a good question. I was going to go over that. Dear sir slash madam is the more formal. So if you're in a formal situation, yes. If it's, high-tech company or a Disney, dear cast member, dear cast recruiter, casting talent scout, or dear team member I've seen, dear colleague, it depends who you're writing to. But I would find out what they call each other. Team member, some people were big family, I wouldn't say dear family member. Some people call it staff. Try and see how they, like Disney uses cast member, how they refer to each other. And if you're sending to a recruiter, you can always use dear recruiter or dear. Sometimes you say recruitment team. It's up to you. But people do use team member. Just make sure it's very respectful. Whatever you choose, be respectful.
Gotcha. We had a question from. Yep. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Perfect. That was great. So we actually had a question that that addresses what happens after you send the cover letter. So if you follow up and they don't get back to you, do you try to contact them again?
So you've already followed up once and they don't get back to you?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, if it's a job, I would wait. So you wait a week. Of course, now look, if you're applying for a job that's been posted for a month all over the world, as a client of mine just did, they're going to get hundreds to thousands applicants. It's going to take them a while to get back to you. So you have to take this into account. Waiting a week if you applied at the very end is probably not long enough. You got to wait 2 weeks or something for them to go through all that to get to you. 2 weeks you can follow up. If you don't hear from them in another week, 10 days, then I could follow up again. I wouldn't follow up after the second non-response follow-up. I certainly wouldn't follow up through the same channel. If I could find somebody through my network, including Ivy Exec people, business school people who worked there, who could find something out for me, I might do that. But I might do that even sooner. If I hadn't heard back in 3 weeks after I'd pinged them, I might do that.
Mm-hmm.
There's what we call the front door and the back door, the side door. If you can go in through the front door, but so many others are going that way, you always want to come in through a back door or side door, if you can, possibly. And it is okay to apply 2 ways that way. Go through the front door, go through a side door, that's okay. Don't apply 5 ways that way because that'll be annoying. But if I see you twice that you came in through a network and you came in through a call, the open call or posting, it won't bother me. It will just lift you out of the pile.
Great. Well, that's a good answer. Maybe we have time for one more. Is that okay, Staci?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, great. So Beverly asked, what are your suggestions for a cover letter to someone you met at a networking type event?
Right. Well, I think that goes back to, was it the question Staci asked about if you already know you're going to get an interview but you're applying through the front door, what do you say? In that first paragraph where you speak about how you heard about, or just remind them of where you met them. I enjoyed meeting you at the Marketing Association event last week. Really enjoyed learning from you about XYZ, or the developing trend in customer data analytics, or whatever it is. And look for, I don't know exactly why you're connecting with them, but wanted to follow up with blah, 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 blah. Now, it's best if you can send them a little, I know people that always attach a little link to a blog entry or something about the topic that they were discussing that adds value to whatever that person working on, struggling with. You can do that. But basically remind them of where you met them because people are so busy, and a little bit of what you talked about. And the best way to have something to remind them about what you talked about is to talk about something of value when you're meeting people, which I know we're all doing. But to find what you connect on, to find some areas of connection, so then when you go to follow up with them, you can remind them of those areas of connection and build on those areas of connection somehow. But I would think through my goals of why I'm following up with them, because you want to ask very specifically. I just wanted to remind you to send my resume to that person you mentioned, or you were going to check on something for me, or can I come take you out to lunch or whatever, or coffee and pick your brain and get feedback on my resume, or whatever it is. I might even set up with them when I met them. I just put together a new resume or something. I'd love to get your feedback on it. Again, an excuse for them to read your background, your resume. Hopefully it doesn't have lots of responsibles in and participated and assisted. But whatever it has, you would like to get them to read it. All right. Mache, that's it for that one.
Perfect, perfect. And with that, we would like to, thank you everybody once again for coming. Thank you for making this I think one of the biggest webinars we ever had. So thank you so much for the participation, and thank you, Staci, for hosting it as well.
Thank you, and I hope I answered all your questions. Hit me up later if I did.
Great. And with that, have a great night, everybody.
Take care.